What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so just want to give a quick reminder before I get into this video. For those of you who are not aware, I have a Patreon. And the Patreon is for content that is not suitable for YouTube. Increasingly, that's the case as YouTube has cracked down on free speech and has cranked up the censorship. So that is an option that I have for my subscribers. I want to thank the around 600 people or so that are signed up or part of the Patreon. I do still have a video I got to put out. I was supposed to put out yesterday. I had some technical issues. Still got a video I got to put out on the Patreon later on today. And I upload regularly on the Patreon. And there are two tiers. There's a $2 a month and a $5 a month tier if you're interested in signing up to the Patreon. And if you can afford it. So let me get into this. So I saw this on U.S. Election Atlas. The Trump team has dropped out of New Hampshire. They've dropped out after they've come to the conclusion that Donald Trump cannot win in the state of New Hampshire. Recent polling, I think, has swayed that decision. So a poll that came out August 21st, which was conducted by the University of New Hampshire Service Center, had Kamala Harris leading Trump by 7 points, a 50% to 43% margin. And a poll that came out on August 19th, which was conducted by the St. Anselm, hope I pronounced that correctly, St. Anselm, College Survey Center, had Kamala with a similar margin of support, 51% to 44%. Poll conducted by both colleges the prior month, July, had Kamala Harris leading by about 6 points. So, if anything, her lead has slightly expanded, as well as her favorability in both polls since she entered the race in July. So this is the thing. How do you want to look at this, right? How do you want to look at this? Well, you could say, if you're Team Kamala, Team Blue, you could say, well, this is a bad sign for Trump. You could say, well, this is a state that he came within, I think, 3,000 votes of winning in 2016 against Hillary. I think it was 348,000, 345,000, if my memory serves me correctly. Well, maybe he could pick this off. And it could be seen as a sign that maybe the trend is going against Trump, and maybe this Kamala will win by a larger margin than expected or win at all. Maybe there's truth to that. But you could also look at it as, well, the Trump campaign is moving smart, and that they aren't wasting their times campaigning and competing in states that they're not going to win. And that they're going to put their money, time, and resources into states that are competitive and states that they can pick off. Or just win, whatever. When I say pick off, I mean states that had voted Democratic recently. Look, I remember reading about Richard Nixon in 1960 when he won against John F. Kennedy. Now, he made this pledge to visit all 50 states. He wanted to visit all 50 states to show that he was energetic. Because, Kennedy was young, vigorous, vibrant. He was only 43 years old. That's a trip, man. I'm now older than John Kennedy was when he ran for president. Damn. But anyway, Eisenhower was older. At the time, Eisenhower was the oldest president in history. He turned 70 that year. Nixon was only 47. So he wanted to emphasize that he was younger. This is the two of the youngest candidates ever to run for president in the same election. I think it's the two youngest ever to run in the same election. So he wanted to show us by vitality and being vigorous. And he did. eventually he did run in all 50 states, even though he missed 2 weeks of campaign time. I think it was in late August, early September, when he got a terrible infection in his knee that almost, had he not gone to the hospital, if I remember, it was some incident, some event in North Carolina. I think it might have been Raleigh, where he hurt his knee, and it got to the point where they said if he had waited another week, his leg would have had been amputated. But anyway, it was a major waste of time because Kennedy, on the other hand, focused his resources on the electoral rich states, the bigger states, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois. And ultimately, that proved to be decisive because I think he won in all of those states. So you can say Trump is going smart on this. I really don't know what to think about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, either one is feasible. You know what I'm saying? But I will say this. Judging from a historical standpoint, Trump kind of is wasting his time in New England. He's kind of wasting his time. I think at best what's going to happen is he might get one electoral vote out of Maine. There's a congressional district, because, you know, Maine and Nebraska are different from every other state when it comes to electoral college. The 48 other states in D.C. award all of their electoral votes as to who wins the state. Even if you win by one goddamn vote, you get all the state's electoral votes. Now, prior to 2016, there were sometimes faithless electors. In 2016, I think we've seen the most faithless electors ever. In that election, I think Hillary Clinton lost 5 electoral votes nationwide to faithless electors. Trump lost 2 in Texas. I think, if I remember correctly, the Supreme Court ruled that that can't happen anymore. Electors they're required now to vote for the winner of the state election. And I think that's kind of a good thing, because what could conceivably happen is this. What if, for instance, in 2000, which was already a very controversial and acrimonious election between Bush and Gore, right? And we all know what happened in Florida. I think that Gore got cheated. I remember reading that 22,000 votes were thrown out in Dade County in Florida, which at the time was heavily Democratic. Can't help but think that Gore was going to win at least 80% of the vote there, 70, 80%. He would have won. Then, of course, you had the issue with the ballot and how it was laid out, and some people who meant to vote for Gore accidentally voted for Patrick Buchanan, who was running as a Reform Party candidate that year. So whatever, man. But what if, when Electoral College met in 2000 in December, after everything was decided in the Supreme Court, what if 2 electors decided, you know what, fuck Bush, I'm not going to vote for him, and it goes down from 271 to 269? Well, then nobody has a majority. Then it went to Congress, and I think at the time Republicans were in control, so Bush might have still been good, but that could be disastrous if the opposition party is in control. So I think that's good. Let me say this too before I end. You could argue that New Hampshire only has 4 electoral votes, so who gives a shit? But in a close election, it matters. It really does matter with each state. If Gore had simply carried New Hampshire, because Bush picked it off in 2000 narrowly. If Gore had simply won New Hampshire, he would have won the election. It wouldn't have mattered if he lost Florida. So it does matter. Lately, New Hampshire has been, since 2004, a state that leans blue. Bush won it in 2000. Kerry retook it in 2004. Obama won it handily in 2008 and pretty comfortably in 2012. Hillary almost lost it in 2016, as I said, to Trump. But some of that had to do with the incredibly high minor party vote that was allocated to people like Jill Stein and Gary Johnson, who essentially were bleeding votes from Hillary. 2020, Biden won it pretty comfortably, and now it seems like Harris is expanding her lead there. If that's and look, I'm gonna tell you something though. For her to lead by 6 or 7 points, if there's any accuracy in that, I'd be a little bit nervous if I was Trump, though. I mean, you could argue maybe it's just a further erosion of Republican support in that region. Look, New England used to be a heavily Republican state prior to, I would say, the 1950s, right? Prior to the 1950s, or really prior to the 1960s. I take that back. Prior to the 1960s, New England was a heavily Republican state, a Republican section. But their brand of republicanism was a little different from what we think about Republicans today, right? They were very big on the basic philosophy of Republicans, keeping government out of our lives. They're pretty big on fiscal issues, taxes, things of that nature. That's why when people go to New Hampshire, the campaign, they're always talking about pocketbook issues, right? But what started turning off Republicans from the Republican Party was the Southern strategy. That started turning them off, right? When Republicans started making a play for conservatives, religious conservatives, the Republicanism in New England was not really from that vicinity. It was more about the issues I mentioned. Socially, many Republicans were liberal or moderate. So the increasing conservatism of the Republican Party was beginning to turn off Yankee Republicans. That's why if you look in the 1980s, 70s and 80s, it started deteriorating more and more and more. The last Republican to really have a lot of success in New England was Bush, the first Bush in 88. By 92, Pat Buchanan and his conservatism, repudiation of Bush by the conservatives and the party, the total control of the Republican Party by the religious conservatives and the far right, that turned them off. And that's why New England has become generally more Democratic. Also, New England has become a lot more diverse in its population. You got more minorities. Culturally, it's changed. So even though Donald Trump is from New York, so he had a little bit of a bump in 2016, his brand of politics is a turnoff. That's why his support in that region is starting to slip. I mean, it's been slipping more and more. So I wouldn't be surprised if states like Vermont, I wouldn't be surprised if Kamala Harris gets close to 70% of the vote there. She's going to win Massachusetts. She's going to win Rhode Island handily. She's going to win Connecticut. She's going to win I think I already said Massachusetts. She's going to win New Hampshire. Maine, at best, Trump might get one electoral vote from that state because there's one congressional district. And I didn't make this point. I went away from this point. Maine and Nebraska allocate their electoral votes via congressional district. That's why Biden and Obama in 2008 and 2012 respectively was able to get electoral vote out of Nebraska because there's one congressional district that leans Democratic. And in Maine, there's a congressional district that's more conservative. Although I will say this about Maine. Maine has become a little bit less blue in recent elections. Very blue when Bill Clinton was president. He was winning well over 60% of the vote. And I think he's also last Democrat to win every congressional district in the state. Maine has trended a little bit blue, but it's probably still going to go blue for Harris. She'll probably win at least 3 of the 4 electoral votes, maybe all 4. We'll see. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.